I call this meeting to order. This is the 110th meeting of the Standing Committee on Finance. Our orders of the day, pursuant to the order of reference of Friday, March the 8th, 2013, we are studying Bill C-48, an act to amend the Income Tax Act, the Excise Tax Act, the Federal Provincial Fiscal Arrangements Act, the First Nations Goods and Services Tax Act, and related legislation. I want to thank all of our witnesses for being here. I think because of the weather, some colleagues are still making their way en route to the committee. We have with us 6 organizations, 6 individuals who are here to present to the committee. Premièrement, à titre personnel, Madame.
First of all, as an individual, Ms. Bridget Alpin. Welcome to the committee.
With Moody's LLP Tax Advisors, la Coalition de Travailleurs et Travailleurs Autonomes du Québec, Monsieur Stéphane Laforêt, the President.
And we have with us the President, Stéphane Laforêt.
From KPMG, we have Lauren Schillinger, a partner there as well. And by video conference, Montréal, Québec, Fédération des ordres professionnels de juristes du Canada, le Président.
The Federation of Law Societies of Canada, President, Mr. Gérald Tremblay.
I have 5 minutes for an opening statement. Et on va commencer avec Madame Alpin, s'il vous plaît.
We'll begin with Ms. Alpin, please. Good morning. Thank you for your invitation to appear before you today. Considering the size of the bill involved, I am going to concentrate on certain points only. This is an area which during a previous reunion in this committee, this particular item was indicated as one of the important aspects of the Act. To understand these rules, we know about tax havens, which are dealt with in a summary manner, multinationals who have income, and the income is achieved, and if there's a business income, it would be during repatriation to Canada that tax would be applicable to such income. So to continue on this question of repatriation, we have companies which have funds in tax havens. The sums involved can be loaned to Canadian multinationals. Thus, the rules relating to these loans, this has to be considered as a dividend, as has been explained before this committee during previous meetings with respect to these upstream loans. So this seems to be a good policy. Why did Canadian tax authorities wait so long to apply or introduce such rules. However, the effect on public finances may not be all that great. So as regards these rules on upstream loans for Canadian multinationals which are trying to avoid having their funds repatriated, we must remember that there have been amendments which meant that they have not had to pay taxes in case of countries such as Gila, Aruba, Bahamas, Costa Rica, Dominica, the Cayman Islands, the Turks and Caicos Islands, Saint Martin, Saint Kitts, Saint Lucie, and the list can go on and on when there are other agreements with other tax havens. Antigua, Barbuda, Brunei, Grenada, and Liechtenstein, Panama, and others. So this total lack of tax on income of international multinationals in these tax havens make us wonder about the usefulness of establishing rules along these lines. And there have been changes since January 2013 with respect to these tax havens. So in spite of the limited practices, the limited effects of legislation on upstream loans, I do suggest that the bill be adopted because it's high time that we do something along these lines. We have to adapt these fiscal measures to the realities of the 21st century. And there is a worldwide movement toward defiscalization, but I do recommend the adoption of the bill.
Please.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honorable members. Thank you for the invitation to appear before your committee to speak to you about Bill C-48. My name is Kim Moody. I'm a tax practitioner from Calgary, Alberta, and a partner in a unique tax advisory practice comprised of approximately 20 Canadian chartered accountants, U.S. certified professional accountants, Canadian lawyers, and U.S. lawyers. We focus strictly on tax advisory matters for the private client with the benefit of the two professions that dominate the practice of tax in Canada, which is accountants and lawyers. Most of our clients have direct or indirect interests with our southern neighbors, being the U.S., and therefore we practice in U.S. tax law as well. I've had the pleasure in my 20-plus years of practicing tax to serve for some of the distinguished organizations representing our profession. For example, I'm the immediate past chair of the board of the Canadian Tax Foundation. I'm also the immediate past chair of the Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners, STEP. And I've volunteered extensively for the Canadian Institute of Chartered Accountants in various tax capacities, including being I'm a current member of the CICA-CBA Joint Committee on Taxation. However, my remarks today are not at all to be associated with these prestigious organizations. Instead, my remarks to you today represent the views of myself and our firm. At the outset, our firm supports the passage of Bill C-48. While some of its contents are not perfect, as I'll comment later, it is important to get it passed. More than 200 years ago, Adam Smith, in his landmark book, The Wealth of Nations, laid out the basic principles of a good taxation system. Overly simplified, those principles are fairness, certainty, convenient to pay, and administratively simple. While we could debate those four principles for a long time, it is the certainty principle that would be compromised by not quickly passing Bill C-48. We believe that certainty in tax matters has been severely compromised by the inability to pass the collection of technical amendments that comprises Bill C-48. We expressed this view to the Auditor General when we were interviewed by her office prior to the release of her fall 2009 report. For example, as a private practitioner, do we advise clients to adhere to existing law or proposed law? Not an easy question to answer given the recent history of how long it takes to get technical amendments passed. As you know, Mr. Chairman, some of the content of Bill C-48 originates from 1999. As mentioned, Bill C-48 contains technical amendments that are by no means perfect. For example, number 1, proposed section 56.4, the restrictive covenant proposals, about which I wrote a paper for the Canadian Tax Foundation in 2008. They're very wide-sweeping and can have significant unintended consequences. And if you're interested in good bedtime reading, I'd be glad to give you a copy of my 60-page plus paper. And the non-resident trust proposals, number 2 in section 94. Such proposals are extremely broad and nearly incomprehensible. There are compelling arguments that our firm agrees with and are consistent with Adam Smith's principles that wide-sweeping, imperfect, and incomprehensible draft legislation should not be passed. In a perfect world, such draft legislation would be more targeted, have less unintended consequences, and be understandable. However, Bill C-48 contains measures that reflect good tax policy reasons for its inclusions. To not pass such imperfect legislation would compromise Adam Smith's fairness principle, which at this point is critically important to consider. We only hope that such imperfections can be later fixed. Our firm is sympathetic to some of the factors that have led us to where we are today. We commend the Department of Finance for the hard work that they obviously do to ensure, to the best extent possible, that Canada's tax legislation is fair. We would encourage the government to explore better ways to pass important tax proposals into law in a more timely, accurate, and comprehensible manner. For example, it would be ideal for the Department of Finance to engage the private and academic tax community on tax policy matters on a regular basis. Our firm's clients are usually successful private clients. Such business and individuals contribute greatly to the economic success of this country and deserve a certain tax system. Thank you for your time. I'd be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you for your opening presentation. Ensuite, Monsieur Laforêt, s'il vous plaît.
Alors, bonjour à tous les membres du comité. Dans un premier temps, je souhaite adresser...
I would like to thank the committee on part of our coalition to be able to come and appear before your committee. It is a first time for us, and actually we are very seldom consulted, so often it is the employers and the unions which appear. But as regards my presentation today, I would like to talk about self-employed workers, some 10% of the working public. And the number of self-employed workers is going up every year, twice as much as salaried workers. The difference is that the salaried worker has an employer, whereas a self-employed worker is someone who has created his own job. You take business risks to do so. And his main relationship is with clients, not with a boss. For the Canadian economy, the increase in the number of such workers comes considerably from new communication techniques, but also the need to have flexibility in managing their human resources. And it's very advantageous for these self-employed workers because they have chosen to be an independent worker. And our coalition has always opposed measures to try to give self-employed workers, such as those given to employed workers, when it deals with the amount of time that they have been working. Now, the Quebec plan for parental insurance is an important one for independent workers, and when it was set up, a lot of independent workers have been able to benefit from this plan for parental insurance, and independent workers contribute to this plan. They help to finance it, and they pay higher than salaried workers, something like 78%. So an independent worker, as you'll see in my brief, pay something like 178% of what salaried workers pay, and they pay it as a business worker, not as an independent worker. So they pay what they would pay as a salaried worker plus an additional amount because they are an independent worker. This bill, C-48, in certain 96, clause 96, the combined effects of paragraph 196.1 and 253.1 of the bill have an unfortunate effect on independent workers because it deals with the amount the self-employed would have paid as QPIP premiums as if they were a salaried worker, and as well the amount paid by the self-employed worker in excess of the foregoing amount because he or she is not a salaried worker but an independent entrepreneur. And this involves the above-mentioned 78% surcharge. So the independent worker is going to have all sorts of paperwork as well. So this is really a fictive division of the self-employed workers' QPIP premiums. So they should be able to make deductions for their business like any other taxpayer. So there should not be this double treatment, this fictive division of the workers' premiums. We feel that this needs to be changed because the bill is designed to establish some harmony as regards the taxation system for workers, but we would like to see this simplified. We would like to avoid making the bill unnecessarily complicated for taxpayers. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you and good morning. My name is Greg Bomer. I'm a tax partner with Ernst & Young, and on behalf of the firm, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to appear before this committee in connection with Bill C-48. It's important in our role as tax advisors with clients that we're able to provide our advice to our clients based on legislation that is both clear and certain. Clarity and certainty are critical elements in supporting the integrity of the Canadian tax system. Taxpayers must comply with the laws in Canada, and the Revenue Agency, the Canada Revenue Agency must administer them. We would observe that this process is made all the more difficult for both taxpayers and tax administrators, where there are long delays between the initial introduction of a tax proposal and its ultimate passage into law. Bill C-48, as you know, contains a number of years' worth of proposals, some of which were introduced in previous tax bills that have never been passed into law. That has left many taxpayers with a great deal of uncertainty in managing their tax affairs. Clearly, the passage of this legislation will restore a substantial amount of that certainty and clear a big part of the backlog. As noted by Minister Flaherty, the last comprehensive package of technical income tax amendments was passed in 2001, clearly a very, very long time ago. So, Mr. Chairman, I think it's fair to say that we greet Bill C-48 with a sense of relief and hope to see its speedy passage. As the committee is aware, many of the technical amendments included in the bill have been in a state of flux for many years, including changes intended to enhance the integrity of the system and preclude certain types of planning that the government considers inappropriate. Mr. Moody has commented on some of those, including the NRT rules, and there are other rules such as the upstream loan rules, surplus manipulation rules, etc. Clearly, these are a set of complicated rules, but we nevertheless agree with their implementation and passage. Taxpayers have an obligation to abide by current tax laws, but they must also plan their financial and commercial affairs based on proposed taxation measures, including any legislation introduced by the government. Often, proposed tax changes are effective as of the date of their initial introduction. Also, sometimes they are effective on a retroactive basis. These outstanding proposed tax changes, of course, result in a compliance conundrum for taxpayers. Taxpayers and their advisors also place a significant reliance on comfort letters, which tend to deal with technical anomalies in a complex statute. With such a preponderance of outstanding legislative changes in the prolonged period of time that many of these changes have been outstanding, there will clearly be relief felt by those who regularly deal with the Income Tax Act and have the job of interpreting the statute. As I've implied, we support Bill C-48 and, for that matter, the timely enactment of tax legislation in general. We recognize that a goal of achieving more timely enactment needs to be balanced with providing an adequate amount of time to study the relevant measures and seek input from interested parties. In this regard, we commend the Department of Finance for its ongoing efforts to constructively consult with taxpayers and other professional and business organizations regarding these matters. In the time left to me, I'd like to provide 3 examples of the types of problems which arise where proposed legislation is outstanding for an extended length of time. First, in our experience, taxpayers may be reluctant to complete particular commercial transactions where the tax legislation on which the taxpayer must rely has not been enacted. This may be because of possible changes to draft legislation, particularly where the legislation has remained in draft form for an extended period of time. Second, where draft proposals or legislation is outstanding over a prolonged period, this may have adverse cash implications on a taxpayer, either because refunds have been held pending confirmation of enactment of proposed new tax rules, or because taxpayers are effectively prohibited from objecting to adverse assessments. Finally, there are important financial statement implications relating to outstanding tax legislation, as generally speaking, the accounting rules prohibit accounting for income tax proposals until they are either enacted or substantially enacted. The accounting rules are based on certainty of knowing what is as compared to what may be. In conclusion, we see the ongoing need to address the issue of tax certainty in the timely introduction and passage of tax legislation, including regular technical amendments. Thank you, and be pleased to respond to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bomer. We'll now go to Mr. Schillinger, please, for your presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lauren Schillinger, partner and national leader of the KPMG Canada Real Estate Tax Practice. This morning, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to speak with the committee on the importance of the Technical Tax Amendments Act and its significance to the real estate industry. Bill C-48 represents a Herculean effort by the Department of Finance to catch up on a decade of outstanding tax measures. Long limbo periods are difficult. Taxpayers and their advisors need certainty of tax policy and legislation to prepare and file tax returns. Accordingly, the enactment of this legislation will be a welcome relief to the tax community. For the real estate industry, the key amendments in Bill C-48 are the changes to the tax rules governing real estate investment trusts. A REIT is an entity that uses the pooled capital of many investors to invest in and manage real estate rental properties. Unlike direct ownership of real estate, an investment in a publicly traded REIT is highly liquid and available to investors with limited investment capital. REITs are managed and structured to pay out regular tax-efficient distributions to their investors. For these reasons, investments in REITs have been favored for retirement savings. These legislative changes represent the successful culmination of 6 years of back-and-forth discussions. A brief review is in order. On October 31, 2006, new rules, the SIFT rules, were announced to shut down the public income trust sector. After a reasonable transitional period, a publicly traded SIFT would be subject to tax at rates similar to corporate tax rates. REITs, however, would be exempt from this SIFT tax. This was the first time that the definition of a REIT was introduced into Canadian tax legislation. Each subsequent iteration of the legislation was an improvement. Early 2007, amendments clarified a REIT's rental revenue and property and allowed internal property management subsidiaries. Late 2007, amendments accommodated existing ownership structures and allowed foreign property ownership. Late 2010, amendments further clarified a REIT's qualifying revenue and provided a welcome safe harbor for a limited amount of non-qualifying revenues and properties to be held by a REIT. The changes in Bill C-48 represent the fourth set of revisions to the REIT rules and complete the cycle. These further changes finally create a workable system for REITs to invest in, develop, and manage real property and to expand globally. Actually, the real estate industry would like a fifth series of further amendments, especially to accommodate seniors housing and hotels to qualify as REITs. In conclusion, we greatly appreciate this legislative process. The Department of Finance did listen. The amendments in Bill C-48 provide the necessary legislative framework for Canadian REITs to invest in and operate in Canada and abroad. Both the industry and government objectives are met. REITs can function in a commercially reasonable manner, but must do so within the limitations imposed by policy. For all constituents of the REIT community, we greatly look forward to the enactment of this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Schillinger. Ensuite, Monsieur Tremblay, pour votre présentation.
Mr. Tremblay, you have a presentation for us? Thank you.
From a distance, you will have seen that the weather would have not allowed me to be physically present, and although I would have loved it. Also, I would like to say that I'm assuming that our formal brief of the 21st of February 2013 forms part of your record. So my notes are in addition to that brief. La Fédération est un organisme.
Our federation is an organization which coordinate the jurists of the provinces and territories of Canada. Some 100,000 lawyers and 400 notaries in Quebec. And we are concerned by the bill as it is drawn up with respect to the profession of lawyer.
Notaries report to the government on the affairs of their clients. Tax transaction on which the legal counsel have provided advice is antithetical to independence of the legal profession. That is a core principle of Canada's legal system. It is also contrary to the duty of loyalty all legal counsel owe to their clients. Ces principes sont essentiels au fonctionnement efficace de notre.
This is essential for the effective operation of our system. The Supreme Court has indicated in various decisions that clients must be able to speak freely to their legal advisors without the fear that these discussions may be revealed to the state. This free and open relationship is only possible if clients can count on the total loyalty of their legal advisors.
It's a very short passage of a judgment of the Supreme Court in Canada versus Law Society of British Columbia, 1982. And I quote, page 335, "The independence of the bar from the state in all its pervasive manifestations is one of the hallmarks of free society. Later on, the public interest in a free society knows no area more sensitive than the independence, impartiality, and availability to the general public of the members of the bar and, through those members, legal advice and services generally." End of quote. Si on exige que les avocats et les notaires du Québec se servent
If we require lawyers and notaries who have confidential knowledge of their clients' activities, if they have to reveal information to the government, they become agents of the state.
Colombia in a case involving the regulations under the Proceeds of Crime, Money Laundering and Terrorist Financing Act, the BC Superior Court found the government's attempt to extend those regulations, which includes reporting requirements similar to those contained in the bill before you, is unconstitutional. This case is now before the British Court of Appeal, awaiting decision. The case has been pleaded. Il existe une façon simple et directe de
There's a simple way of resolving the concerns of members of our federation with respect to this bill. It should be amended to exclude lawyers and notaries in Quebec from the requirements of Section 372 to 373 of the Act. This would be quite simple. Just amend the definition of advisor, and we will be sending the committee a proposed amendment for this particular section in order to exclude lawyers and notaries from being covered by the reporting requirements.
Questions? There are rounds of 5 minutes each with Ms. Nash, please.
Okay, merci beaucoup et merci à tous les témoins.
Thank you. I'd like to thank our witnesses for coming here today to share your expertise with us. I would like to start with a question to Ms. Alpin. We're talking about a tax regime should meet three principles, should be effective, efficient, simple, and perhaps I didn't fully understand, and I'm going to be asking my question in English.
Understood you correctly. Did you say that the changes that we are making to tighten up our laws for upstream loans by companies, in other words, loans that they make in essence to limit their tax liabilities, that when we negotiate trade agreements with some of these countries that are that have a reputation for being low tax jurisdictions, potentially tax havens, that they could be exempt from the laws that we are tightening here in Canada. Could you explain that? Perhaps I've not understood correctly. Si vous parlez en français, je peux.
If you wish, please answer in French. Well, what you said summarizes what I've said, but it's not exactly that, and I will explain it for you. We know that there have been recent amendments to the Income Tax Act, to Section 597, and there's a question of exchanging information with a tax haven. Now, the fact they have signed an agreement with a tax haven, Canadians, multinationals may be making income in those areas. The income which is created in that spot could be repatriated to Canada without tax implications. So if a Canadian multinational makes profits, business profits, in all of the tax havens I referred to in my presentation, they will not be taxed either in the tax haven, if the tax haven doesn't have tax, nor will they be taxed in Canada. Then we have legislation or regulations dealing with upstream loans. So the legislator has regulations in that case, but then there are other regulations which could make it possible to avoid paying tax on repatriated funds. So if there is no repatriation tax on money realized in various tax havens, they won't have to develop strategies to avoid this tax because this tax no longer exists. I hope that's clearer. Thank you. I think I understand a bit better, and I may have some other questions, but
a question to all of the witnesses in my very little time left. We appreciate that you've come here to express the need to get this bill passed. I think all of us agree with that. We're also searching for mechanisms to avoid having another 10-year gap like this where technical amendments are not brought forward. And in the brief time I have left, would any of you like to comment on a specific recommendation? Here's what we think you should do so that we don't have this lag. Is there any kind of legislative change you would recommend?
We have about 30 seconds.
Oh,
so
dear.
Is there someone who wishes to take that on? Mr. Bomer, please.
I would just say try to get on with it and push the process through Parliament, because it seems most of the bills have died on the order paper and could have been pushed through, and we wouldn't be sitting here today with quite so much. This is quite a bit.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Nash. Ms. McLeod, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses again in terms of bringing your expertise in this very complex bill to the table. I'm going to start by picking up on Ms. Nash's point, and we've had some debate, and I'd really be curious to get a few of your perspective. You know, some people are saying a sunset clause would be a good thing, and others are saying that would actually create increase havoc for our clients, that we really just need to ensure sort of regular updates. So I would be really pleased if perhaps Mr. Schillender, Mr. Bomer, Mr. Moody, and Ms. Alapin could speak to, you know, would that actually create some havoc if for some reason we had minority governments and issues with legislation where you were heading forward in one way with comfort letters. Could you comment, please?
Okay, I apologize. Personally, I would probably think it creates havoc if you just because taxpayers are encouraged by the tax authorities to actually file on the base of proposed legislation. So if you don't have the law actually introduced in the ordinary course and it dies, there's a concern that taxpayers have already filed their returns and planned their affairs based on the proposals and need to rely upon them. So.
Mr. Bomer?
And I think that taxpayers do very much rely on both draft legislation and comfort letters. And most of the changes that we're talking about here are very, very technical in nature. They don't seem to typically deal with policy. So we've lived with a system. Some of the amendments in this bill go back to as far as 1996. And, you know, taxpayers, while they regret having to follow so many versions of draft legislation, do try to do that, but it would be a lot simpler if the technical amendments could be passed on, let's say, a regular basis, yearly, once every 2 years at most.
Thank you. Mr. Moody, have you got comments?
I would agree that, and I've read some of the transcripts and discussion about sunset clauses, and I don't agree at all. I think that there's very, very good reasons for not having that. And a quick example, the restrictive covenant proposals. I mean, that was specifically introduced as technical amendments to counteract a decision of the Federal Court of Appeal called Manrell, where ultimately taxation of restrictive covenant receipts were found not to be taxable, which was very, very surprising for a person like myself. So very, very good tax policy reasons for introducing such legislation. This draft legislation goes back to 2004. If we had a sunset clause you would have a whole bunch of people that would continue to plan to make restrictive covenant proposals tax-free, which in my view is ridiculous and ultimately introduces complications that would be further unintended. So I don't agree with that whatsoever.
Thank you. Ms. Alapin?
Je suis d'accord avec.
Yes, I agree with the remarks which have made up to now, and also in previous meetings about the complexity of this system for Canadian taxpayers who really have trouble understanding what exactly tax legislation involves. And as Mr. Moody has said, there are rules going back to 1996, and we are in a situation where we say we have to adopt this in 2013. It's about 15 years we've been living with this. But not just in Canada, but in other countries, various rules could be worked out, could be thought over again. So this system, where we are very much delayed as regards our tax system. It's difficult for taxpayers, but it's also a complicated situation for members of Parliament who are trying to adopt this legislation, and they are dealing with a great deal of historic background.
Mr. McCallum, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bienvenue. Mr. Moody, you seem to be damning this bill with faint praise because after invoking Adam Smith and his principle of clarity, you say that the provisions in this bill are incomprehensible. And if they're incomprehensible to you, an expert, they must be truly incomprehensible to the rest of us. So, I mean, we support this bill for reasons others have given, but how can you support a bill which is incomprehensible? How can such a bill actually be enacted if nobody can understand what it is?
That's a great question. However, I would suggest that it's much more than faint praise. As I said in my opening remarks, I commend the Department of Finance for getting this through, for getting this legislation on the table. However, with such a huge piece of draft legislation, it's not unusual that there's going to be some technical deficiencies, and in particular, there's some draft legislation contained in this bill that clearly are incomprehensible. I mean, the non-resident trust rules in Section 94. I don't know about any of my other fellow panel members here, but I could probably count on my left hand how many people in Canada that probably know this stuff inside and out.
But if it's truly incomprehensible, shouldn't it be amended?
Ideally, it would be, as I said in my notes. But I would suggest if I had to place Adam Smith's principles, certainty and fairness are above, in my view. They're the more important. And as I mentioned in my notes, how do we give advice? How do we give proper advice to clients if we don't know what we're dealing with?
Okay. Well, I'll pass on, but I still don't understand how certainty can be consistent with incomprehensibility. But I'll go to another issue. In an earlier blog, I think, you said that revisions to the personal services business rules will have a dramatically negative impact for persons who carry on a personal services business through a corporation. Well, can you describe what this dramatically negative impact is and give an example or two of such an impact?
I'm impressed you read my blogs.
Well, we're informed in the Liberal Party.
Well, the impact is going to be significant in the sense that we now have an increased 13% lift on the tax rate, whereas it used to be somewhat neutral to carry on through a personal services business corporation, and to a certain extent advantageous. And the hammer prior to the reduction in tax rates was not as dramatic as it is today.
But again, this is sort of damning with faint praise. It's a dramatically negative impact, but you still support the bill.
Absolutely. And do I support personal services business corporations? Not at all. The point in what I was writing was that if you're going to carry on this dangerous game of carrying on your business through a personal services business corporation, then you better beware. I by no means support carrying on personal services business corporations.
The last question to you.
Sure.
This is another thing you wrote.
I love it.
While many of the other proposed amendments are controversial, it will be welcome to obtain certainty on the passing of the proposed amendments so that we can give sound tax advice. Well, which of these measures do you regard as particularly controversial?
The non-resident trust rules are quite controversial. The ones I mentioned and the restrictive covenants. I mean, I support the restrictive covenant proposals. I think it's offensive that people should be receiving such amounts tax-free. But the legislation itself is so broad, and same thing with the non-resident trust rules. They're so broad that there is significant unintended, I believe, unintended catches.
Okay, thank you. Do I have time for one more question?
30 seconds.
Okay, pour Monsieur Tremblay. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous donner...
I have a question for Mr. Tremblay. Could you give us an example of a case where this bill and the principle of client-lawyer privilege, where it would not be respected? Well, yes, it's hard to give an example because we'd have to work up the scenario because this is a new measure. But what I want to say is that when a client comes to see you and you say to the client, if you want me to serve you well, you have to tell me everything. Now I would have to say to the client is I may have to reveal what you have told me, so you have to be careful what you say to me. This is very difficult for a legal advisor to accept.
Mr. Moody, do you accredit most of your vast intelligence to the raising of yourself in Fort McMurray in the 70s? I'm just going to...
I was born in Prince Albert, actually.
No, seriously, Mr. Moody, very impressive testimony so far. I'm curious about a couple things. Now, first of all, the amendments to the tax statute, in particular, they're pretty much of two types. One is a relieving, and and the other is remedial, as far as what the purpose of them are, and both of them obviously affects tax revenue somewhat. They fix overtaxation or they close tax loopholes. Would that be fair to say for the majority of these tax amendments?
You want me to answer in Fort McMurray speak?
Yes, please. That would be best.
Here, so.
And for the benefit of the rest, I grew up in Fort McMurray, so the honourable member knows my stomping ground. But I would suggest, overly simplified, yes, I would agree that.
So really what we're here today talking about and what we've been hearing testimony over the past period of time and what we have been trying to pass through the House is to fix overtaxation or to close tax loopholes. That would be fair to say.
Generally.
Yes. And the source of these are either decisions from courts, comfort letters that have been sent out. I understand there's about 30 a year, and some other minor changes that are suggested by either the Department of Taxation or some of your experts that are here today.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. So how do other countries communicate proposed legislative changes like these? Are there any similar...
Interesting question. The most obvious is the United States. And watching the lead of some of my colleagues, we have 8 U.S. tax lawyers in our practice, and so watching how they analyze U.S. tax legislative changes, it's quite different than Canada. And by no means am I an expert in that process, but I would suggest that our process is, number one, very, very different, but probably fundamentally not all that different in terms of the sources of change.
Well, I just noticed that, for instance, in Part 1 of C-48, it's the 8th time the Department of Finance has tried to change NRT and FIE rules.
Yes.
8th time.
Yeah.
Now, does anybody understand why that is, why it's been the 8th time, and we're still sitting here studying it again, and the opposition, although they talk that they're in favor, actually make moves that they're not. So does anybody understand why that's taking place? because really we're talking about fixing overtaxation and closing tax loopholes, which are obviously very important to government revenues and also important for certainty and Adam Smith's mandate.
I would suggest with respect to the non-resident trust rules, given the fact that they were very controversial at the time that they were first proposed, and the numerous studies and consultations and presentations that were done by interested parties, and then, of course, with the minority governments that we had and the inability to get it passed, I would suggest that hopefully we never see something like this happen again.
But it must, for all of you gentlemen and lady here today, you must really wonder what you're doing here again, and we're spending the same amount of time, and more time, in fact, studying a bill that no one's opposed to.
If what you're suggesting is that we're frustrated that it's taken this long to get through, then I would agree.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Schillinger, would you like to add anything to that?
No, the same comment too. It's not only it's preserving the integrity of this tax system, and it's time to get this bill passed.
All right. And in fact, have you heard of anyone? Has anybody here at the table, any of you experts, heard of anyone speaking against passing C-48? Any legitimate opposition to it? None.
Small little nits here and there.
All right. Thank you very much. Those are all my questions.
Jean, we'll go to Mr. Côté, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. When I listened to my friend Brian, I remember when I was on the International Trade Committee and there were objections dealing with free trade agreements, not that we were against them, but because there were clauses which we didn't support. I would like to get back to Ms. Alpin. I found your presentation very interesting, particularly the contradiction which you picked up. You indicated there were some very good points in the legislation, but that they were going to be contradicted by agreements to agreements to avoid double taxation. Now, we have been studying tax havens. And the real problem is perhaps not so much the fact that people try to avoid taxations, but the state gives them the possibility to do so, that there's some contradiction here. Now, in your study, did you look at transfer fees? Because this is another point to be looked at, and you indicated to Ms. Nash that the government is actually working against itself in passing some of this non-taxation legislation. As regards, well, when I look at the Bill C-48, and I look at the proposals made by the Canadian government with respect to taxing Canadian multinationals, it seems clear to me that on the one hand, the government does not really want to stop some fiscal fraud, because taxpayers, people who do not respect the tax system through the use of tax havens, the government does not really seem to be trying to stop this. And yet, when it's a case of wealth, personal or corporate wealth, they want to have a legal system to lighten the tax on these amounts. So we have the international transactions, tax havens. There seems to be a two-level system. If you're not a multinational or you're not extremely wealthy, you're subject to all sorts of rules to avoid tax fraud in your case. But if you were in the fast tracks, the non-tax fast track, although not wanting to support removing taxation, but there seems to be this contradiction, this double system. So thank you very much. This is very useful for the study of tax havens now. Mr. Laforêt, I was very interested in your presentation. I had experience working as a self-employed worker before being elected to Parliament, and it wasn't altogether a happy system, a happy situation. Now, you talk about the insurance, parental insurance for workers in Quebec, and there were some differences between salaried and self-employed workers. Now, when you talk about certain deductions, I only have 30 seconds left. If we talk about Clause 60.8, do you think that the agency should look into this to improve the situation? Reply. As regards these contributions and the program, this parental insurance program started back in 2006. It's a complex situation, and if we look at the provisions which deal with the tax treatment of this program, I would say that the situation is that there is 118, Clause 118, which deals with deductions or tax credits to a wage earner, but not to a self-employed worker for contributions they have paid to UI. And in that clause, there will be included the deduction for the QPIP.
Delighted to see all of you here this morning. I would like to begin by commending Mr. Moody on mentioning Adam Smith, and I would highly recommend The Wealth of Nations to my friends in the NDP. It's not only far more enjoyable reading, but far more practical reading than the Marx and Engels reader. So I would encourage you to head to your nearest bookstore and pick up a copy. Conceptually speaking, this bill is about tax fairness, as you had indicated, Mr. Schillinger. Now, since 2006, our government has closed about 50 tax loopholes. And as a result, we've been able to bring in about $2.5 billion more annually. Could you, I put this to Mr. Beamer first, could you comment on this bill more as a bill trying to achieve tax fairness and tax consistency and stability in the marketplace, as opposed to just a sort of run-of-the-mill tax bill?
That's a very difficult question in a sense. I think it is fair to say that businesses and corporations have, and individuals for that matter, plan their affairs based on actual tax legislation, and it's very clear that this legislation is aimed at fairness, does close a number of loopholes, does broaden the base in certain circumstances, but also, on the other hand, from a taxpayer's perspective, has a number of relieving measures that really do help the taxpayer get through with a particular transaction. And so it's a very, very welcome sight from that perspective. The main issue, as I see it, and I'm sure some of the others here today would see it as well, is that when you have a change that's introduced and then it's changed again and it's changed again through various iterations and reintroduced several times, it makes coming to a decision and an interpretation of a particular provision in the Act very, very difficult. So I think enacting this with all the potential shortcomings is nevertheless a very good thing for the government to do. And, I think I see in terms of looking forward, additional amendments obviously required, but perhaps at some point in time to look at the statute and try and figure out if some sort of reform is necessary.
So passing this bill as expeditiously as possible would not only benefit taxpayers, both from the business community and individuals, but would also help tax practitioners to do their job.
Absolutely, and it's not just our job, it's getting on with business for our clients.
Creating additional jobs, growth, and long-term prosperity in our country. Mr. Schillinger, could you comment on the consultative process and how your clients view that entire process? We're known for being very consultative and reaching out before we come up with legislation that's introduced into the House, of consulting almost to a fault. Could you comment on the degree of satisfaction among your clients in terms of our consultative process and reaching out and getting their opinion?
It's an excellent question, and actually it's been very much top of mind for us as well. So the initial announcement in Halloween in 2006 wasn't consultative. It would have been a shock to the system. But again, it's a policy choice, shutting down a sector. The REIT community as a whole was greatly relieved that they were spared, and there's global precedent to keeping real estate investment in flow-through structures and preserving that. So, the REIT community responded with relief that they were spared, and then dealing through the technical material that followed months later, it was drafted quickly and had flaws in the drafting the legislation that made it difficult for the REIT community to actually follow the rules. But the process continued. All of the professionals serving large REITs and the Joint Committee of Taxation of the lawyers and accountants all made submissions to Finance. I know I was one of 3 people that flew up to the Department of Finance in the fall of 2006 to start our series of meetings with the Department of Finance. And those meetings were productive. So, no one said no to us. It was a very healthy debate around taxpayers that just wanted to follow the rules and making representations to just make those rules work with a modern REIT structure. Developer, a landlord that builds and develops and rents to tenants and forms structure throughout the years, just wanting to make the rules work. So, the process was very good and healthy. And we went back as different versions of the bill came out and there were flaws brought to their attention. They were addressed and fixed.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Adler. We'll go to Mr. Rankin, please.
Thank you. And first of all, to Mr. Adler, through you, Mr. Chair, about Adam Smith, who I read regularly, I'd like to quote him: "To feel much for others and little for ourselves, to restrain our selfishness and exercise our benevolent affections constitutes the perfection of human nature." That's Adam Smith. I'd like to ask, first of all, a question of Maître Tremblay, if I could. You mentioned, sir, the reporting requirements that the BC Supreme Court found unconstitutional in respect of parallel legislation, and indicated the BC Court of Appeal is soon going to pronounce on that appeal. You said, I think, that there's a section of Bill C-48 to the same effect. And so what I think you're saying is that if that Court of Appeal decision stands and is applicable across the country, then we'll immediately have an unconstitutional section of Bill C-48. Is that what you're saying?
Well, there's nothing absolute in law, but I'm saying that we're all in favor of a speedy passage of this legislation. But if we could avoid further litigation, a very minor amendment to Section 17 or to Section 237(3) would close that possibility, and I think would respect the integrity of the relationship between the client and his lawyer.
And when you speak of lawyers, and I recognize, of course, sir, that you're accountable to the lawyers and notaries of Quebec, what about tax advisors who are accountants? What about those advisors? Don't they have similar concerns, or wouldn't you expect that there should be some similarity? I realize solicitor-client privilege is not applicable to other professions, although in Quebec there may be something in their professions code that would be applicable. But isn't this a little unfair?
Well, the issue here is really professional privilege. The Supreme Court, and I would say that in all quote-unquote civilized countries, the lawyer has always had a very special status because of what it is. The solicitor-client relationship is extremely important, and I realize that it could be very embarrassing too for accountants, may require some adjustments for them too, but I speak for the legal profession.
Understood.
But the legal profession has always been described as a foundation of our system.
Okay, now I'd like to ask Mr. Moody a question and demonstrate that it's not only my colleague, Mr. McCallum, who reads your blogs. I think you in the bottom line said that one reason for the changes in the complexity is a feeling within government that there's a lack of compliance in certain tax areas, a general feeling there's a whole bunch of abuse out there. The Department of Finance wants to capture that abuse as broadly as possible. As a result, rules are created that are often incomprehensible, to use a word you've used again this morning. So when you speak of that, are you speaking more of multinationals and large corporations, or are you thinking of individuals, or both?
I'm thinking of everything.
Okay.
I think if there's a perceived mischief that's going on, one way of drafting around, or one way of fixing that problem with respect to drafting legislation is to take a shotgun approach and try to kill everything that's perceived to be the abuse now and into the future.
But when you talk about lack of compliance, is it possible, or were you thinking about the lack of resources for the Canada Revenue Agency, or perhaps a difficulty in retaining personnel, et cetera, that might be contributing to that lack of compliance that you refer to?
Yeah, I can't recall exactly the blog you're referring to, but in general, I would suggest that, yeah, but there's probably significant under-resources. Or try that again. You just can't staff everything to catch all the abuse. I don't know if I answered your question, but...
So I think that in another blog that you referred to, or your Moody's tax advisors talked about a deduction against Canadian tax for the vast amount of professional fees paid to the IRS Offshore Voluntary Disclosure Initiative, and argued that there ought to be this deductibility. Can you speak to whether C-48 addresses your concerns?
No. Bill C-48 doesn't address that whatsoever, and I wouldn't expect it to. Can I just address one question you had?
Sure.
237.3 sub 17, which is what Mr. Tremblay is talking about, does carve out solicitor-client privilege. So just for your information, it does already carve that out for lawyers. So I guess I'm a little puzzled as to where the issue is. But having said that, I'll just throw that out to you.
Thank you.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, well, you've got about 10 seconds, Mr. Tremblay, if you want to respond.
Just one. It's just because for 17, the privilege belongs to the client, and on 17, they force the lawyer to make an assessment as to whether or not one portion of his consultation is covered, the other portion is not covered. All of that without his client knowing about it, and it is an impossible situation for a lawyer.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Mr. Van Kesteren, please.
Thank you all for being here. You know, sometimes we tend to think that a bill like this is pretty dry, but I think as we've mined into this thing, we start to see the importance and just how fundamentally important it is that we pass this thing. And I'm interested, Mr. Moody, you were talking about business transactions and how that slows down commerce. And we had a witness here last week, I believe it was a week prior, that gave an example of an American company, an entrepreneur that had come into this country that had done very well, then wanted to sell his business, and then move. And of course, when transactions are made, and that types of transaction, the money starts to flow, and things start happening. And I'm wondering, is there? Do you have examples of that happening, where commerce has stopped because of the laws that just aren't clear, or making clients just stop in their tracks?
A live example. This is about 5 years ago that comes top of mind. Pick my favorite topic again, the restrictive covenant proposals. We had a transaction where a client was selling his business to an American company for a significant, I think it was about right in the $100 million range. He was selling his business to an American company. And it was a private business, and there was some non-compete agreements that had to be granted by the individual who owned the company. In this particular case, and this was the early days of the draft legislation, there was a bunch of elections that had to be filed if you respected the draft legislation. The U.S. counsel involved, who represented the purchaser, didn't understand what this meant to them. And we insisted that if you're going to respect the draft legislation, you've got to sign it. Anyhow, long story short, the deal died simply because of that.
You know, and I've argued this as well too, and I understand, and I think we've talked at length about the fact that there's a necessity to create legislation because people are going to cheat. But for the most part, I would argue, and I think I want to get your opinion on this, that most corporations, most individuals want to pay their taxes, not necessarily because they want to pay their taxes, but they want to get it done. And they don't want to be told, and I've had this happen personally, later on, a year or two later, a little bit of a different ruling the government's made here. It kind of like democracy's sword just kind of hanging over you. And is this the sort of thing that this legislation is going to correct? Is this the sort of thing so that companies and individuals know, yes, I paid my taxes, I can go on, I can reinvest, I can start to do the things that business people do? Is that a correct assessment? And I would just give it to you, Mr. Moody, and maybe Mr. Bomer, if you want to add to that.
I think it's a contributing factor, yes, because like my panel members have already agreed with it, it's important to get certainty. And this goes a long way to getting that certainty and keeping business moving.
We're certainly aware. I've got one particular example on the go where if a taxpayer transfers a particular asset on which there is an advance income tax ruling and which is based on an outstanding comfort letter, which is included in Bill C-48, the accounting treatment is very odd. It would give rise to recording all of the tax in the financial statements. When Bill C-48 is passed, that liability that arises in the financial statement will be reversed based on what the law actually will be. It's a very anomalous result, and it stopped the taxpayer from going ahead and completing the transaction.
And just finally, we talk about, Mr. McCallum was talking about tax simplicity and simplifying the code. Is that a realistic objective? Or is this the answer, that we just continuously just do these sorts of things and maybe on a timely basis? Can we have tax simplicity? Is that something that we can achieve? And I leave that open to whoever wants to jump on that one.
And obviously that's an admirable goal, simplification, and it's good media. Let's simplify the tax, as the media often says, code, but it's really the act. I think it comes at a price, though, and it comes at a price of fairness and equity. And is there room for simplicity? I would suggest there probably is, but do I think it's realistic? Nope. I don't. Not in today's current environment. Commerce and the way that we conduct business is way, way, way different than when the Income Tax Act first came in 1917.
You're just out of time, Mr. Van Kesteren. Did you want someone else to comment briefly?
Alpin was just...
Madame Alpin, brièvement, s'il vous plaît.
Je suis d'accord.
I agree with what Mr. Moody is saying, but in upcoming years, we don't know whether there will be financial or fiscal crises and whether people will have to be able to judge whether the legislation is fair and just. With the present act, it's impossible, even here it's impossible to know exactly the impact of this bill. So in the short term, I don't think we can simplify the legislation, but in the longer term, we don't know what the future holds for us. We don't know what taxpayers will want from the legislation.
Merci beaucoup. And first, just to answer Mr. Adler, I've read The Wealth of Nations actually twice rather than once. A really interesting book, but it makes more sense when it's read in conjunction with Theory of Moral Sentiments that Adam Smith also wrote. So I suggest this reading as well to Mr. Adler. Hey, it is. I think it's more readable. Actually, je suis d'accord avec M. Van Kesteren que ça a été une étude qui...
I agree with Mr. Van Kesteren. It's a very interesting study, and it's very complicated for parliamentarians. Some of it's very difficult to understand. It's a very long bill. I have a question for Mr. Vollmer and perhaps Mr. Schillinger, and someone else may also want to comment on this. The government wants this bill to go through as quickly as possible. Now, should it go through immediately with no delay? Would you suggest that Parliament or the committee doesn't even study these questions in depth so that the bill can be passed as rapidly as possible? Do you think the process is important to study the bill before us for its content and the process used? Mr. Boomer, perhaps you could answer first.
You know, it's a very big bill, and I think it's been studied a lot by a lot of people. I think, as Mr. Schillinger has mentioned previously, the Department of Finance has been open to consultation on a number of the provisions that are in the bill. I think at this time it's probably, it does make sense to get on and pass the bill, and if there are further technical amendments that are required, that they are made after the fact. They are made at a later date.
La question que je vous posais, c'est par rapport aux parlementaires, par rapport
as regards parliamentarians and the committee, and then the officials as well, who are experts, Mr. Moody realizes that the bill has elements which are incomprehensible. So do you think it should go through on the goodwill of the Department of Finance and the officials in the tax department? Because here, as parliamentarians, we have a responsibility to study not just the content, whatever the time period involved, but also we have to deal with the process for developing, creating bills, because what we have heard from you and from other witnesses is that the bill is very interesting, but we need more information to deal with something which is so complex in the fiscal area. Mr. Schillinger?
Parliamentary process of reviewing legislation at all. So whatever the process is of getting this bill enacted, stick to it. Full speed ahead. Not slowing down the review process that's critical to it. What I will echo is comments made by the panel. I don't know if I would use the word incomprehensible on the legislation. I will tell you that there's many parts of it that in areas that I don't practice in, that we have specialists that spend their whole life on it. I would say the bill is highly technical and beyond a lay person. So you're talking about complex areas of law that require people that have dedicated their life to narrow provisions. And the community has said on all the various subject matters in this technical bill that the fixes that are in it, the policy changes that are important by the government are critical to be put through now.
Merci. Une minute. Madame Alper, rapidement, on a effleuré.
Ms. Elpin. We don't have much time left, but we're talking about simplifying the system, reviewing acts which exist already. So how could parliamentarians launch such a process? How could we start dealing with this? Well, at the present time, given the government's limited resources and the very technical aspect of this bill, the fact that it will affect many taxpayers, but not all taxpayers. So for many reasons, I would tend to think that there should be a cleanup to eliminate the points which are really not appropriate, and then get ahead with passing the legislation as quickly as possible, and in future ensure that such situations do not arise. Because taxpayers in the country are starting to get tired of all this. We're debating a bill which many people don't understand, so we have to be very vigilant. We will have to continue carrying out studies. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I guess, Chair, first thing I want to do is thank the witnesses for being out here this morning and giving your presentations. It's interesting, though. There's nothing in your presentations I haven't heard in 3 other meetings previously, or probably in the meetings that have been held in the last 6 years or 8 years, or how many years you want to go back since the last set of changes. So, Chair, I think I ought to respect these witnesses, and I hope the opposition party will start showing respect to the witnesses, too, and their time and the money we spend to bring people in for this, and listening to their request that we just get on with this and get this piece of legislation passed and move forward. I'm going to let my time go back. I really don't have any more questions that I haven't heard or haven't been asked previous meetings, and I see no reason to use up their time ineffectively. So I will give my time away to the next person. So if the NDP needs a little more time, feel free.
Okay, thank you.
I think we should just get on and pass this legislation.
Well, Ms. Glover, you have the next round as well, so I can give you an extended round. Is that okay?
Thanks. And I'm going to try to make it brief as well. I do want to thank the witnesses for being here again. We've met many times before, some of us. I have to say, Mr. Moody, although you might have Alberta blood, you make a lot of sense to us Manitobans. And in that vein, I want to ask you a specific question, but it has much to do with what you've already addressed, this solicitor-client privilege. So just for the record, because we've heard the one side by Mr. Tremblay, for those who are watching, the BC case is not at all a tax issue. First and foremost, not at all a tax issue. When the Proceeds of Crime legislation was first enacted in 2001, lawyers and Quebec notaries were required to report suspicious transactions of their clients. That's what the case in BC is about. It's not a tax case at all. So, for example, if a client paying a $10,000 bill in cash to a lawyer, they were required to report those kinds of suspicious transactions. And that's why the law societies have challenged this and have been challenging it for more than a decade. It's been before the courts. So, different act, different tax issue completely. Mr. Moody, you hit the nail on the head, because you said that this C-48, in fact, page 836 of Bill C-48, actually specifies and clarifies that a lawyer who acts as a legal advisor to a client is not required under the regime to report information about tax avoidance transactions that is covered by solicitor-client privilege. And so I understand that that clarification was actually made after consultation with the Canadian Bar Association and the Federation in 2010. So let's move to what the concern is of Mr. Tremblay. So the Federation's now saying all lawyers and Quebec notaries should be exempt from the reporting rules. Well, I think the concern here is if we do a broad exclusion like that, it would significantly undermine, obviously, this law's effectiveness. And the obligation on advisors under C-48 to report only exists in situations where their fees are contingent on a client obtaining a tax benefit from an avoidance transaction or where the tax benefit is otherwise guaranteed to the client. So when the lawyer puts his own skin in the game, when he's got money dependent on what comes back, that's when he's required to report. And in these circumstances, of course, advisors and promoters already have this. They have a personal interest, like I just described, in the success of the reportable transaction. And they've already, if a lawyer does that, he's or she has compromised their independence and their duty of loyalty to the client and ought to report. And I think this is a good compromise. I want you, Mr. Moody, to comment on the fairness of that, because frankly, if tax advisors have to report and lawyers start to do the same job you're doing under a cloak of secrecy for their own benefit, it'll put you out of business, wouldn't it? So do you think this is a compromise that is fair?
Wow. I think I understand Mr. Tremblay's concern, and without trying to put words in his mouth, I'll try to at least summarize it from what I understand. The concern is that what advice is solicitor-client privileged and thus gets the statutory exemption from the reporting rules, and what is not. Because unlike what many lawyers think, and I'm a student of privilege. I'm not a lawyer, but I've studied privilege for the last roughly 20 years. You know, without trying to brag, I probably know more about privilege than the average lawyer. Having said that, it's a very, very difficult area to try and determine what's privileged and what's not. And so I'm guessing my colleague is suggesting that we don't want to be put in a position like that where we have to decide what's privileged and what's not. And you know, I can sympathize with that.
Well,
I understand
in C-48, it actually says, it actually clarifies it, and I think it's pretty clear that when the lawyer is actually going to obtain some kind of fee because there's a tax benefit of the tax avoidance measure, so when he's got skin in the game, that's when it's reportable.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say. I mean, because I love the legal profession. I certainly respect privilege. I think there's a very, very good, frankly, the Supreme Court has said it's constitutional right. So, I mean, I get it.
Yeah.
However, do I think that lawyers should be able to just simply wave their white flag, or white flag's the wrong word, but just wave a blanket exemption and say, nope, we're not going to be subject to these rules because it's privileged? No, I don't think so. Because to your point, does it compromise non-lawyers? Yes. Does that raise policy reasons for having people like, you know, a lot of the people around our table here having statutory privilege? Perhaps. But that's a question for another day.
Okay.
Very good.
Ms. Clever, Mr. Tremblay does want to respond to your question as well. He's been waving.
I've been seriously attacked, and I want to answer. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. No, don't worry. So first of all, the problem is not if you compare the money laundering legislation and this one. It's true that it is on two separate topics, but the reporting requirements, whatever the area in which we're talking, reporting requirements from a lawyer raise very serious privilege issue in whatever domain you are. The second, the benefit, I don't buy that at all, because you have a lot of cases where you have contingent fees. For instance, class action. For instance, medical malpractice. A poor lady does not have any money, and she's been the victim of a bad operation. She doesn't have the cash to put forward and to bring the action. The lawyer will say, "I'll take 30% of whatever I get for you." Do you think that type of arrangement would affect the solicitor-client privilege? To link the method of payment, the method of fee arrangement to the privilege, I think is a very dangerous slippery slope, and I would strongly recommend that you don't get into that at all. Lawyers with money laundering, the deal that has been struck with the government, but it was not enough, so that's why we went to court anyway. But let's say the basic deal was, if the law societies do whatever is required to discipline bad lawyers, and I have a good quote here, when men are pure, laws are useless. When men are corrupt, laws are broken. Disraeli said that. So if the law societies have what it takes by way of own regulation, their own regulation, and the staff to enforce it and to discipline the bad lawyers, that is enough. That should, the independence of the bar is very important for the general public.
Okay, Ms. Glover, you have 1 minute in your round.
And in response to that, Mr. Tremblay, and I absolutely respect the solicitor-client privilege. I mean, I spent a lot of time in law enforcement, and it's absolutely crucial to the fairness of the justice system. And so, I commend you for the work you do. I don't mean to attack you, but the position that you put forward is what I take issue with. To be very frank, the suggestion that a malpractice suit is somehow similar to a tax avoidance. So advice being given to a Canadian to avoid paying taxes to the government, which help us pay for the medical system, etc., is far-fetched. I'm sorry, I'll disagree with you there. And the easiest way to stay out of this is not to make your fees contingent on a tax benefit from tax avoidance. Plain and simple, and then continue your work as a lawyer. Let the tax advisors do the work that they do, and let them report it and be transparent to the government in the best interest of Canadians.
Okay,
Thank you.
We're going to have.
And if you do it, if you should not do it, you don't lose privilege.
We'll have to let this be a matter of debate. Colleagues, we are at the end of our rounds. I'm advised at least 2 of the members wish to move their motions today, so I'm suggesting we thank our witnesses at this point and move to motions. So I do want to thank our witnesses very much for their presentations here today. We've talked about some interesting blogs. I know members will want to be reading up on those as well. If there's anything further you wish the committee to study, please do send that to the clerk. We will ensure that all members get it. So I will thank our witnesses, excuse them, but colleagues, I do want you to stay at the table, and we will start on with our motions right away. So thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And firstly, if I can just colleagues, if I could just ask a reminder that amendments for this bill should be sent to the clerk by Thursday, March the 21st by 5 p.m. I think everybody's aware of that, but I just, again, want to make that on the record. Amendments should be sent Thursday, March 21st by 5 p.m. Okay, so we have 4 motions, but I'm advised that Mr. Hoback and Ms. Glover want to move their motions. So we'll start with Mr. Hoback, and Mr. Hoback, if you could, everybody has a copy of the motion, but perhaps read the motion and then explain why the committee should adopt this or not.
Thank you, Chair, and I guess I'll read the motion first here, that the Standing Committee of Finance undertake a study on emerging digital payment systems such as mobile wallets or near-field communications in Canada, including but not limited to an overview of the new digital payment technologies, including the challenges and opportunities they present, an overview of the evolving role of government oversight of these systems, and how to best ensure businesses and consumers benefit from these new systems, and that the committee report its findings to the House. The reason behind it is, as we look forward to these new type of technologies with smartphones and near-field communications, there's some issues in consumers' awareness and in consumers' eyes on protection, privacy, what happens with the information. There's also some concerns about the type of data and information that's been presented. This is going to replace a wallet someday. So I think as a committee, it's important for us to understand how this system's working, what the impact it will have on not just the business community, but consumers and constituents. So I think we should take a few meetings and just go through this new technology and get some opinions from people in this field on where it's going and have an understanding of what any type of regulations, if any, are going to be required, and make sure that we're positioned properly as this new technology emerges. So that's why the proposal's there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Hoback. To the motion is M. Caron, s'il vous plaît.
Avant de siéger au Comité des finances, je siégeais.
Before sitting on the Finance Committee, I sat on the Industry Committee. I don't know whether Mr. Hoback knows that, but there was an almost identical study carried out by the Industry Committee on electronic trade and various payments using a cell phone example. So the report was presented barely 6 months ago. It's quite an exhaustive report, some 90 pages. So I would suggest that we look at this report to see whether it was appropriate for our committee to study this as well. And if there are some specific points Mr. Hoback would like to address, perhaps the Industry Committee and the Finance Committee would be appropriate for this study. Because with the little time available to us, with the budget coming up, with consultation on the budget implementation, this might not be the best use of our time to redo a study already prepared by another committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I want to commend Mr. Hoback for the proposal, and I just want to add that the Finance Department is actually responsible for much of the oversight for measures that affect consumers like this new digital payments. And unfortunately, the Industry Committee hasn't looked at what the responsibilities in that area would be, and that's why the Finance Ministry, I think, would take some good best practices from a study like this. Of course, we've heard numerous times the NDP ask questions about protecting consumers in the House of Commons, and we have developed as a government the Code of Conduct, and we continue to look for ways to ensure consumers are protected. And so again, the Industry Committee did not look at the oversight mechanisms. They did not look at how the Office of the Superintendent of Financial Institutions would play a role in that. And so because of that lapse, this is a tremendously important proposal put forward by Mr. Hoback. I intend to support it. I intend to continue to protect consumers as well as we possibly can, and this is just one more piece towards making sure that we continue that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jean, please.
Took the words out of my mouth, but my understanding of the industry report was that it was more technical in nature in relation to the specifics of it, and my understanding is that it actually we could utilize more of the financial implications of what this new technology means and utilize the industry report to do that. So just from my perspective, it was more of I thought it was more of an industry specific on the industry committee dealing with the technology, whereas this would be more of the financial implications. But Mr. Caron, I'm happy. I have not reviewed the industry report, but I would be supporting Mr. Hoback's recommendation as well.
Thank you. I have Mr. McCallum, Ms. Nash.
Well, thank you. Perhaps this is implicit in the motion, but I think one of the issues in such a study should consider the transaction fees, because in certain instances in Canada, those are said to be high. So in terms of consumer protection, I think that should be a part of the study.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Nash, please.
Well, I'm recalling how limited our time is on the Finance Committee, and we had quite a large discussion in the subcommittee trying to squeeze in more time for the motion from Mr. Bryson on inequality. And we know we have...
This is a public meeting, and so subcommittee discussion should be...
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize it was on the
This
record.
is public,
sorry.
yes.
Sorry. Sorry, I thought it was in camera, but sorry. So we're limited in terms of our time, and there are so many competing recommendations for studies. And while I respect the intention of Mr. Hoback, I have not had a chance to read the industry report, and I'm wondering whether. In fact, I didn't know that the Industry Committee had done a report on this exact same subject recently. And so my question is, has everyone read the industry report, and do we know for sure that the questions that are being raised have not been studied? Because I have not had the chance to do that, and it would be a shame with the limited time that we have in the Finance Committee and how strictly the Chair has been interpreting the the domain of the Finance Committee in terms of what we can and cannot study, and what is and what isn't in order for study in the Finance Committee. It would be a shame to replicate work that was already done by another committee.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Caron, and then Mr. Rankin, and then Mr. Holback.
Très rapidement, je suis d'accord avec...
Well, I agree with Ms. Nash. If we look at the committee report, well, it's not just technical elements, although they made a major part of the report, but there was also the question of transaction fees were looked into carefully, and privacy, for example. This was looked at in committee and in the report. Now, the motion before us at the present time, where we ask for a role of the government oversight of these systems, how to ensure small businesses and consumers benefit from these new systems. That's also been dealt with in the committee. So if we look at the wording of the motion, these are elements which were dealt with in the industry committee and appear in the report, which was published barely 6 months ago. It's important to protect consumers, but the main point here is to know whether this matter has already been dealt with because of the other work which will be coming to us with the budget and the budget implementation, and we have a lot of work to do between now and the end of June. We have to use the committee's time appropriately.
Feeling a little conflicted because I listened to Mr. Holback's motion and I thought it was really important and interesting what he's proposing, and I have not had an opportunity to read the report. So I'm listening to Mr. Caron and Ms. Nash, and I'm finding myself in agreement with their point. So my question is a procedural one. Would it be acceptable that we would ask our analyst to look at the report that is already done and advise us on whether or not it addresses these things that are in your motion, and therefore ask Mr. Holback, would he be willing to defer? I'd have an opportunity to read the report myself before having to vote on something which I'm really conflicted about.
As the motion has been introduced, the motion is now the property of the committee as a whole. So the committee as a whole would have to choose to defer or choose to vote or not vote today on this motion. So, okay, thank you. And Mr. Holback, please.
I guess I find it really interesting because I've had groups come to me saying there's lots of confusion in this area, there's lots of work that needs to be done in it. So if the industry report was such an effective report, why are they still coming to my office and requesting information and clearance and clarification on what's going forward? In regards to committee time, sure, I've said it just before in the previous meeting, we've been bringing witnesses over and over and over again lately in the last 2-3 meetings that are repeating the same answers one after another, one after another. So if the NDP really want to respect the time of the committee, quit doing that. When it's common motions, when it's something that's consistent and we all agree on, let's push it through and move it through and get on to some business that's actually very relevant. This here is very relevant. This is structural change in how we do commerce. I think this, as a committee, should understand how this is all going to work. And we should have an understanding on who's going to be impacted, and understanding on what type of regulations should be required to make sure that consumers are protected properly. I think we should hear out both sides, both the banking sector and the Consumers Association, and get their concerns on the record under the Finance Committee, and then go forward with what we think for recommendations. That's why I brought this forward.
Okay. Well said. I have no further speakers, therefore I'm going to... Oh, Mr. McCallum. Okay.
I don't know if this is in order, Mr. Chair. I'd like to propose a very small and hopefully friendly amendment. Is that allowed?
Well, amendments are amendments. I don't know why we keep calling them friendly or unfriendly. But
well, one way to find out if
you're
it's
a friendly person.
Friendly is to say what it is and see what people say. My suggestion is that we just... where it says including the challenges and opportunities they present, just say including transactions fees and the challenges and opportunities they present. It's just adding the word transaction fees, which reflects my earlier point.
This would be so this would be in point 1, an overview of new digital payment technologies, including the transaction fees and
or including transaction fees and the challenges.
Okay. That amendment is in order, so discussion on the amendment now. I have M. Caron sur l'amendement.
Oui, en fait, ce que j'allais proposer.
Mr. Caron, on the amendment, I think Mr. Rankin made an excellent report because I think some people have seen the report, but perhaps there could be a motion similar to what was suggested to give us a chance to look at the industry report and if there are points which have been overlooked, so that way the motion could be amended to indicate that these particular areas need to be addressed. Because there were many meetings in the industry committee, we would probably be doing a lot of the same work with the same witnesses being called back. So I would invite the committee and Mr. Hoback just to wait and make sure that what we would be dealing with here in this committee would be points that were not touched upon in the industry committee report, so that we can use our time to the best advantage. Thank you, Mr. Caron.
I like the amendment by the friendly Mr. McCallum. I think it's a good amendment. Now, with regards to what Mr. Caron just said, frankly, I'm quite surprised that the NDP members didn't do their due diligence. We had a week break, actually 9 days, 10 days break. And this motion's been on the table for almost 2 weeks.
We all work very hard.
Yes, we all work very hard during that break serving our constituents. But nevertheless, I'm a bit surprised. And the industry report does not address what consumers are now faced with. Like, can you do a tap and go with 2 credit cards on the same device? What are the rules for the financial institutions to allow this? It does not cover that. They can read the report all they want after the fact. It does not address that, and we must give, with all due respect, we must give best practices so that we are addressing consumers' interests and, of course, financial institutions' interests in this. So, again, I think this is great timing before consumers end up being more confused than they already are, and I do support the amendment put forward by Mr. McCallum.
2 more speakers. I'd really like to go to votes on the amendment and the motion after that. We have Mr. Hoback and Mr. Caron.
Yeah, to Mr. McCallum, that actually was the spirit of what I had proposed there. If that makes you feel more comfortable by amending it that way, I have no problem with that.
Thank you, Mr. Hoback. Mr. Caron.
Madame Glover a dit.
Yes, I understand what Ms. Glover is saying. There are some more technical points which we could address in the future, but that's not what the motion says. It says to study the actual question, the whole question of electronic trade by and large. So the mandate given to the committee by this motion is a very vast one. And if we look at the wording of the motion, it's very similar to what the mandate was for the industry committee. Now, I was involved in the preparation of this report, and I know it very well, and there are points which still need to be addressed. So the amendment or the proposal should be in that respect, because to bring back the same witnesses, to hear the same evidence, to hear points that have already been dealt with, I think what we need is a motion which is more specific rather, to meet the points that we want to make. I think we need something more precise.
Amendment as proposed by Mr. McCallum. All in favor of that amendment? Okay. 7, all opposed. 4, that amendment carries. Abstaining? Abstaining. Okay, that amendment carries. The motion as proposed by Mr. Hoback as amended. All those in favor? Recorded vote.
Okay. Mr. Adler?
Yes.
Ms. Glover?
Yes.
Mr. Hoback?
Yes.
Mr. Jean?
Yes.
Ms. McLeod?
Yes.
Mr. Van Kesteren? Monsieur Caron? Monsieur Gauthier? Ms. Nash?
Oui.
Mr. Murray?
Yes.
Mr. Yes.
Ms. Rankin.
Mr. McCallum?
Okay, the motion is carried. Thank you. Colleagues, we have one more motion for today. Ms. Glover,
No.
No, the amendment carried.
Was a vote on the motion.
Yeah, it was a vote on the motion as amended. I thought it was pretty clear on that. And
We need unanimous consent.
But it was whether we wanted the transaction costs.
Ladies and gentlemen, I don't move all that fast, so I've never been accused of being a quick guy. I don't know. I heard the NDP abstain on the amendment, so.
Doesn't matter really.
Okay. All right. Anyways, it carries. So the notice of motion, the motion from Ms. Glover, please. Colleagues, we have less than 10 minutes, so I'm hoping for a quick debate and vote on this motion.
I'll move it quickly, then I'll just read it, that the Finance Department provide, and the handout that's been distributed has a spelling or a grammar error. It shouldn't say and, it should say AN as and. So that the Finance Department provide an annual update to the Finance Committee on the status of all outstanding technical tax changes in an effort to ensure regular and timely legislation as already committed by the Conservative government.
Great.
Discussion, Ms. Nash.
I intend to support this motion. However, I want to point out the problem with it, which is that the mechanism for requiring this annual reporting, which is a motion at the Finance Committee, would not survive this Parliament, would not survive, in fact, a prorogation. So it is a time-limited mechanism for making such reports required. However, it does move in the direction that we support, which is getting this government, after 10 years, to have more regular technical amendments for our tax laws. So because it is one step closer, we will support it. But I just would like to raise for my colleagues that there is a concern on our part that this is a change that is not going to be a permanent requirement for the Finance Committee, and in that sense we believe it is a weakness in this measure, but we will support it nevertheless.
Okay, thank you. Can I go to the vote on this then?
Well,
Mr. McCallum?
The issue I think I heard was that there should be a deadline, and there is no deadline in this motion, so it could be any time. So should there not be a deadline specified?
Okay, thank you. Ms. Glover?
Just to clarify, I don't think the issue for Ms. Nash is a deadline. It's whether or not this would survive prorogation and then continue to be required annually in the Finance Committee. But as we all know, nothing that we do in the Finance Committee or any other committee for that matter continues after prorogation without the unanimous consent of the committee. And so, of course, we bring it back just like we do everything else and continue as always. But I think a deadline, I think we can all leave it to the clerk and the chair to ensure that it's scheduled yearly, and through subcommittee we can ensure it's scheduled yearly in the calendar.
Okay, thank you. Okay, all those in favor of the motion? I see it's a unanimous support for this motion, therefore I declare this motion carried. Colleagues, one other quick item. Did we pass out the budgets?
No.
No.
But we could do that.
Okay. The budget proposed was emailed yesterday. Here, I need a copy. Now, if there are questions, we can deal with this on Thursday morning, but I don't know if members have members had the time to review this? It was passed yesterday afternoon. Are there any questions, concerns about the proposed budget? On this, Ms. Glover, please.
I just want to, I know that we as a committee had agreed we were going to try as much as possible to use video conferencing, and so I'm very pleased to see video conferencing listed here. But have we, this is the maximum, but I would again hope that the clerk would attempt to offer all witnesses an opportunity to do video conferencing as opposed to coming at expense to the taxpayers here to Ottawa. So, but otherwise, it looks good, and I really do like seeing the video conferencing listed as an expense.
Yeah, that's a fair point, and in fact, we do offer that to every single person, the option of video conferencing. So, thank you. Mr. Cote?
Oui, Monsieur le Président.
Yes, Chairman, I didn't note, well, I'm a little surprised about the unit price trip Montreal-Ottawa and Ottawa-Toronto. Is it because witnesses always fly out of Toronto, why there is a difference in the unit price?
We fly out of Toronto. With respect to Montreal, I mean, the option is there very much in terms of many witnesses do take the train service from Montreal. So the unit prices are the best estimates from those people in logistics in terms of past practice. Yeah. Okay. Motion, Mr. Hovack. Approve the budget. All in favor? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much, colleagues. We will see you Thursday morning, 8:45.